Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
that looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
With something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. 11 years ago, a college student named Elliott Rodger shot 3 young women outside their California sorority, killing 2 of them. It was part of a rampage that would claim the lives of 6 and wound 14 others. The coming months and years would bring copycat attacks by others who, like Rodger, were frustrated by their inability to successfully form romantic relationships, or relationships of any sort. They would call themselves Incels, shorthand for Involuntary Celibates. While their movement accepting and even celebrating violence toward women would remain mostly on the fringes, the Incels' anger toward and dehumanizing of women has expanded, particularly this year. We'll examine what's come to be called toxic masculinity in this episode of Challenge 2.0. So as we explore this problematic but fascinating in a strange way topic, we're very fortunate to have 2 wonderful guests with us. First, I'd like to introduce Rabbi David Bassier from Kadima Reconstructionist Community and also a practitioner of men's work. So David, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
And people may be familiar with our other guest, Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown from Plymouth United Church of Christ, and also the pastor there. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
I know that we're going to have a fascinating conversation on this, but at the very outset, I'm going to tell you that I brought up this topic just in a general conversation with some friends, and one of the friends said, well, there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. I saw the eyes. Give us a verbal response on that. Whoever wants to start first.
Well, I could say yes, there is.
Okay.
And you know, toxic masculinity, I feel like, is based on really. I mean, I don't know exactly how to separate it from sexism, from male domination, from heteropatriarchy, things like this. But toxic masculinity is ultimately, I think, come about. I don't know even when the term came about, but if in my psyche, in my mind, it came around probably 2016. You know, and 2016 is a particular year in U.S. history.
It is.
But what I think I see in that is that there was a permission given to men in a lot of different arenas to act out terribly, but that acting out is not new, right? And I think that some of what this is also is because of it looks to me is because of the Me Too movement, I believe in about 2017, right? And that brought to light things that have certainly been brought to light in the past, but on a mass social wave that I hadn't seen before in my lifetime, in my purview. So toxic masculinity isn't new. It is based on a big lie that men are better, smarter, stronger, etc., than women. I do not believe that, just for the record. But I call it a big lie. And there are many lies at which I think lead to the enablement and the mass, you know, the ways in which toxic masculinity is so prone right now.
Kelly, what's your response to that? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I laugh so much in my spirit, not because it's funny, but I am always interested in the confidence that one must have to say that it doesn't exist. And I think it's really, you know, the forest and the trees paradigm, where it's like often the folks who are so certain that something doesn't exist are probably swimming around and flourishing in it. So, you know, that's not even the question for me, because the experience is it happens so often for me and for folks around me. And I'm not just speaking towards women or feminine folks. I'm talking about seeing young men who are afraid to cry or show emotionality, or, you know, the ways that we embed toxic masculinity even in conversation to say, oh, you know, grow up to, you know, to little boys, or the ways that it's just so a part of the atmosphere
Right.
of who we are together. And so I just think it's the term toxic masculinity, as you've pointed out, Rabbi, is absolutely just naming something that's happened all along. But I think certainly the administration, the podcasts, the way that we use social media, we are seeing the toxicity in full view. And it's certainly alarming, but it's also a chance for us to really have the conversations and the discourse in such a way so that we can not only call it out, but call folks in and to bring about transformation and change for even folks like the one who spoke, who's probably not aware that they are participating in it.
It falls into the category of you can't make this stuff up. But in preparing for this program, just a few days before we held this conversation, and obviously by the time this gets on the air, it will be a longer separation, we had a Christian pastor that said women should be removed from all positions of leadership and none should be placed in them anymore. And then we had the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, that reposted a video that would seem to have him assenting to the idea that the right to vote should be removed from women. Is this surprising that suddenly this has emerged?
Is it surprising?
In a public forum like that?
Hardy no,
Yeah,
but go
I mean,
for it.
No,
Okay.
of course not, is really the answer,
Yeah.
certainly. It's certainly concerning that it's in the halls of power that it currently resides. And I certainly can't sit here and claim that there have not been similar views in halls of power for a very long time. I mean, the 19th Amendment had to be fought for very hard. The president who signed it didn't want to, right? Was pressured into it. So if we're talking about halls of power, national politics, certainly this isn't that new. It's certainly concerning. And I think it's important to make one point, Jeff, about the pastor, right? At least the little bit of that I've seen about it, particularly points to him being a self-described Christian nationalist pastor, right? Not just simply a Christian evangelical pastor. You know, I'm not here to take down Christian nationalism at all, but my experience of Christian nationalism so far, I will leave patriarchy to me and Christian nationalism to you, perhaps, right? But simply, I mean, the reason I say that is because I'm not here to start a fight with a whole lot of folks, but not to. There are a lot of people out there who probably consider themselves Christian nationalists that as the Reverend Doctor just said, that I'd be really anxious not to just call out, but to call in, as you put it. That I'm like, let's talk, right?
Yeah.
I'm not all the time, and there are conversations that might need to end, and hopefully come back to. But that's sort of where I sit in my role as a rabbi, is that I try not to give up on people. That being said, right, Christian nationalism has often espoused sexism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, right? To believe in a Christian nationalist state, especially a white Christian nationalist state, you mix it with Christian supremacy, you mix it with Christian Zionism, and suddenly we got a really potent mix that puts us both at danger, puts both our people at danger, and is sort of taking that idea that we were better off sometime in the past, maybe when some folks were enslaved, maybe when some folks couldn't vote, and it's not a time I'm eager to go back to.
Absolutely.
So Kelly.
Good Rabbi David is so much maybe kinder. But we are dear friends, and so I know our hearts are in a similar place. But I'm just saying that I think we can say with gusto and with confidence that I personally am against Christian nationalism, and it's sort of like me being against sexism, racism, and all the other forms of oppression, but not against the people who espouse it. So we can make that distinction. but I also, in a time where there's so much spin going on, I want to say clearly that there should be a distinction between Christian nationalism and Christianity. I think it more rightly is religious nationalism, because we also see it in other mainline expressions of faith. And I think it's something to speak against. And what's so interesting to me, especially as a Black woman from a particular social location, I grew up in the Deep South, and so I'm at the intersection of a socioeconomic reality, a political reality, a racial ethnic reality. And all of these things remind me so much of the bully on the playground who wanted to play in a certain way to make sure that they would win. And so, it's the baton on a knee just before the skate, competition, right?
Yeah.
It's the deflating of a football. It's all of these things is sort of, let's take folks out, even though the reality that they're bringing this idea from is not in existence, which is, a heteronormative marriage with children, and so the head of the household is voting for the family and is thinking for the family, is leading the family. That's not even remotely in existence currently for many people, and I would dare say there's no need for it. Family is family. However, folks are trying to bully their way into a reality that really didn't work for them either. But it's what's not happening now, and as a expression of their control and dominance, they think they can, force it into being. And I think they know they can't. However, the attempt is interesting because it's sort of pulling out all the folks who have similar mindsets, which is why we can name this as a toxic brew of masculinity.
As we look at this, and we mentioned a couple of particular individuals, it's much broader than that. They have this term, the manosphere, which is podcasts, blogs, radio programs, etc. And we see the range of what might be called toxicity, entitlement, whatever. But the interesting thing is, in doing some research, apparently 2/3 of young men listen regularly or have contact regularly on social media with these manosphere coaches or influencers. And they've also shown that it's much more prevalent among Gen Zers than it is with older men. And certainly, those that are typically considered to be more likely to be conservative, people of my age. What do you think is at work here?
I guess a similar thing that's happening in churches is that Gen Zers are going to these ultra-conservative churches. And I think, as a, older generation, the way we raised our children was with a little bit more lenience and in the name of love. Probably because there was a strong hand on the other side of us,
Right.
So we were trying to, not have our children go through what we did. But as a result, it's created a longing for, and apparently, and some young people fall into these spaces. So I'm not trying to place blame. I'm just saying it's something that, as a watcher of people, that seems to be why young people are tending to go into these places. Because I'm always on YouTube and social media, and it's amazing to me to see youth being drawn in to these conversations.
You've been in men's work for some years.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the sort of work you do, but then also what perspectives that's giving you on this.
Yeah, well, I in terms of what Reverend Dr. Kelly is saying as well, before I go into that, is just that there are surveys of Jewish young adults also, and the way that I'm looking, it's where I have my hyper focus ultimately, and I don't know how much of it is split along class lines, along gender lines, but a lot of what I'm seeing is that younger Jews are often more progressive, more going along, like are more willing to call, for example, what's going on in Gaza, genocide. Are more willing to speak out against at least Benjamin Netanyahu and the government of Israel, let alone possibly the idea of Zionism as a whole. That doesn't mean they're not also watching, manosphere influencers. It doesn't mean they're not exhibiting toxic masculinity in some realms, but I see that trend at least, and I see, and just to go for a second into what's happening in Gaza, right? That the current manifestation of Zionism and the way it's playing out in the state of Israel is certainly toxic masculinity on a large scale, on steroids, on blank checks with weapons, on much from the government in the U.S., et cetera. So that's an interesting statistic to me, just to think about Gen Z also. Pick up on the playground, the bully, the winning, the need to win, right? So the hierarchy and the way in which the zero sum, like there are winners and losers. There are pieces of the pie for if you get it, maybe just first place, maybe first, second, third. Maybe not a whole lot more than that.
Right.
And so, as someone who I was brought up a boy myself, and then also have done a great deal of work with young people. You talk about the playground, my mind immediately goes to visceral memories, and
Yeah, mine too.
Right?
Mine too.
Yeah, right. And so what I've witnessed is using what are considered slurs. Right, of aiming things like "you're a girl" or "don't be a girl," or
"you run like,"
or totally you throw like, exactly.
I wish I could run that fast now.
Right, totally, right. But then also the homophobia, on the as another side of this, where getting called either slurs or just gay,
That's right.
as a young boy. These are basically the two worst things I got called, or I've watched other boys aim at each other in the quest toward being on the top of that hierarchy. There's a vertical line when it comes to like the way we socialize men and boys, and you could be here or you could be here. Right. And what I'm seeking is more of a horizontal line, right? And that's so. Just to your question on men's work, right? Is it's a little bit trying to do that a little bit. We're saying like, how can we actually have each other? How can we, right? We're pushed down. You're saying don't cry, right? That is traumatic. I will say, I will use the T word, right? When I can't vent the feelings I have, and right, like I hear like the potential critique of this, right? Like, oh, poor white man, right? And I think there is a point to that. But that's in a way why I think men's work is so important, in that having each other as men, not relying on women, on black women, on colleagues of color even, particularly as a white guy, et cetera. Folks who are more socialized to take care of, whether or not they break free of that or not. And to heal those wounds, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of the thing that men's work does is not considered very manly.
Right.
Which is, or at least healing, I think like helpful men's work, as opposed to the stirring up and storming the Capitol, literally and figuratively.
Right.
That brings up a point, and one of the people that I remember that used to speak on this was poet and author and researcher Robert Bly. And he had said what he was seeing presented as masculinity reminded him as sort of a mummified version, that it was a caricature. And he said that a lot of these people that are espousing these sorts of things we're talking to today were what he called half adults. They were trapped, they were sort of in Neverland. They were halfway between being a boy and a mature adult man. Do you think that's accurate? And how do we address that?
Yeah, I would say generally that's accurate. I would say that if we get up under the funky belly of toxic masculinity, really it's about this Peter Pan-ish moment where there's almost a struggle and a challenge to stay in this place that is not matured or developed necessarily. And I'm not trying to diminish anyone, but I'm just saying in terms of the the societal expression. Up under this is this childish rather than childlike decision to sort of stay in this place, and it feels almost as if it is really fear and anxiety that's driving toxic masculinity. Because, you know, you hear it even today of, you know, girls develop faster than boys and, you know, they're more mature and all this other thing. And there seems to have developed this generalized frustration, anxiety, fear out of that.
How do you address this? How do you move beyond where we're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, on this point of Peter Panning and you know, half grown or half developed, matured, I think all the it's gonna sound kind of basic, sadly, but it's I think in many ways where I've had to start and also continue for a very long time, and where I see wonderful grown men need to start, and that's kind of just being okay, being in a non-hierarchical, loving, dare I say, caring relationship with other men. I mean, kind of maybe with anyone.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Well, we hear a lot about loneliness.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing,
especially
right?
younger men are lonely these days. They haven't even been able to identify close friends.
Right, and I can't remember exactly what you said before, but that's exactly what it triggered for me, is that there's that the toxicity is actually like, you know, that I am polluted inside.
Yeah.
And certainly that's hurting other people when I lash out, when I take it out on others, when I do things that keep me buttoned up and isolated, and as long as I keep getting sort of promoted for it too, right? You talked about like like not only do we get is it normalized, but we get promoted, right? You get to be president. You get to be, you know, there's a lot of positions we get to be if we if we show the way we're supposed to.
Yeah.
And when we deviate from it, we get hit, we get labeled, we get smacked, we get targeted. You know, some of the things when I talk about, you know, I'm probably most prominent the last few years, certainly, talking about Israel Palestine. When I get targeted for it, it's usually with misogyny and homophobia. Yeah. I'm not a real man because of what I say about Israel Palestine, and it happens constantly, right? It is the way I get attacked, mostly by other men.
If you're observing this behavior on the part of somebody else, what should you do to maybe get them to rethink this, to move in a different direction?
I'm not sure that it's going to be the same thing every time, but what I do believe is something that Rabbi David keeps pointing to, is that the healing is in the heart of community. What we haven't trusted as a nation, I would say since its inception, is the power of community. And really we have been a collection of individuals rather than a communal national reality. And so I think it's different every time. But one of the things that I know is Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman said at the end of one of his books that essentially he believes that humans are longing for one another. And that over the course of dark nights and, you know, shadowy days, we are essentially longing for each other. So it's hard to tell someone that, you know, essentially it's their fear and anxiety and, you know, whatever brain, you know, and all this other stuff that has them present in a certain way. But there is something about daring to be in community with even the people that we're afraid of. Daring to hear stories that don't align themselves with the stories we usually hear, that says, be afraid, be very afraid. And we think it's just in conversation, but it shows up in commercials and movies and all these other things. And essentially, folks play into that. So I think there is a teaching that we can do with each other, just to dare to hear something other than what you have always heard, to dare to say something other than what you've always said, to dare to be around people that you have been afraid of. And you'll find your own humanity in that place, and the ability to know that truly this is a huge ruse to say that you're being displaced. The black and brown folks are coming for you. Somehow we have to trust one another, build loving relationships with one another, so that we can hear in a different way and perhaps show up in a different way. I don't know if it's going to take 10 years or a million, but what I do know is that we can do it on micro levels, as the three of us are doing here, daring to have some conversations where we know, hey, you all could be afraid of me. I didn't grow up in the ghetto, but I grew up a couple miles from it, but you're daring to be at a table with me and not be afraid or believe that, I'm going to take something from you, and same with you. So I believe that's the place to start, and maybe even the place to finish, and we can fill in the middle part somehow.
I think that's a wonderful way to conclude this. I thank you both for your insights, your perceptions.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining this edition of Challenge 2.0. We hope you'll tune in again next week.